Gen Z works more jobs than any generation before them. They save more, budget more, and talk about money more openly than their parents ever did. And yet, by almost every measure, they are further behind financially than their parents were at the exact same age. So, what is actually going on? The answer isn't laziness, and it isn't just avocado toast. It is a specific set of numbers that simply did not exist a generation ago. Start with housing. In 1980, the median American home cost about 3.5 times the median household income. Today, that ratio sits at just over 5 times income, nearly double what economists consider affordable. Home prices have risen 551% since 1980. Household incomes, over that same period, rose 373%. That gap compounds every single year. The result? By age 28, only 38% of Gen Z owns a home, compared to over 44% of baby boomers at the same age. It is not that Gen Z isn't trying. Homeownership among young adults actually ticked up in 2025 as mortgage rates eased slightly. They are just climbing a much steeper hill than their parents did. And the pressure shows up well before anyone even reaches the point of buying. 17% of Gen Z now spend more than half their paycheck on housing alone, up from just 10% 2 years earlier. One bank researcher called that shift one of the most worrying data points in the entire study. Not because any single year looks dramatic, but because the direction has not reversed once. Then, there is college. Since 1980, tuition at public universities has risen more than 700%. At private institutions, over 1,000%. General inflation, over that same window, rose about 236%. Meanwhile, real wages, adjusted for inflation, grew by roughly 0.3 to 0.4% per year over that same 40-year stretch. Almost flat. This is the scissors effect. One line goes up steeply, the other barely moves. Everything in between the gap gets absorbed as debt. The average Gen Z borrower now carries over $21,000 in student loans, and 84% of them say that debt has delayed a major life decision. Buying a home, starting a business, sometimes both. It is worth noting this isn't the story of one bad decade. From 1980 to 2000, public university tuition grew at nearly 7% a year, while inflation averaged around 3%. From 2000 onward, the exact same pattern simply continued. Over 4 decades of that gap compounding year after year, long before anyone currently in their 20s had any say in the matter. Here is where it gets more complicated than the system is broken. Gen Z has adapted, but some of those adaptations carry their own systemic risk. 49% of Gen Z plan to use buy now, pay later services for large purchases this year. 36% are using it for groceries and gas, everyday essentials, not luxuries. That is a meaningful shift, financing basic survival costs on installment plans. At the same time, nearly half of Gen Z is running a side hustle, the highest rate of any generation on record, well ahead of millennials, and more than double the rate among baby boomers. The gig economy isn't a hobby for them. It is a second income stream that often exists purely to keep up with costs their primary paycheck cannot cover alone. The global gig economy itself has grown from around $550 billion in 2024 toward a projected $2 trillion within the decade. And Gen Z is the generation driving that growth fastest. That combination, financing groceries on installment plans while working a second job just to stay afloat, is not what financial stability is supposed to look like at 25, but it is, increasingly, what financial participation looks like for this generation. So, who is right? The people who say the system is stacked against Gen Z, or the people who say every generation faces hardship and this one just complains more? Both arguments have real evidence behind them. The structural view points to the numbers we just covered. Housing, tuition, and wages did not move in the same direction Gen Z's parents experienced, No amount of budgeting discipline changes a home price to income ratio that has nearly doubled in 40 years. The behavioral view points to something else entirely. Gen Z, more than any generation before, grew up watching curated, filtered versions of other people's spending on social media. Lifestyle inflation, the pressure to spend to match what you see online, is harder to resist than it has ever been. And buy now, pay later makes that spending completely frictionless in the moment, even when it isn't free later. Neither view fully explains it alone. A generation can be facing genuinely worse structural math and also be more exposed to spending pressure than any generation before it. Both things are true at once. Here is the part that surprises people. Despite everything working against them, Gen Z is more financially engaged than their parents were. 66% say they are actively saving in 2026, up from 60% just 2 years earlier. When asked what they would do with an extra $300 a month, 54% said straight into savings, a higher rate than millennials, Gen X, or baby boomers. That is the paradox. This is not a generation ignoring their finances. It is a generation doing more with their money than their parents did at the exact same age. And still, 42% report living paycheck to paycheck, and 34% have no emergency savings at all. So, is Gen Z broke because of bad decisions, or because of a system that changed the rules after they were already born into it? The honest answer: the rules changed first. Housing, tuition, and wages shifted decades before Gen Z entered the workforce. What is left for them to control is how they respond to that shift. And by the data, they are responding with more financial awareness, not less. Understanding that distinction matters because it changes the question. It is not, why can't Gen Z manage money? It is, what does responsible money management look like when the underlying math has fundamentally changed? Every generation before this one built its financial habits on assumptions that mostly held. That wages would roughly track the cost of living, that a degree would reliably pay for itself, that a starter home was a realistic 5 to 10-year goal. None of those assumptions hold as reliably today. Gen Z isn't failing to follow an old playbook. They are writing a new one, in real time, with less margin for error than any generation before them. If you want deep, data-driven insights into how business, value investing, and macroeconomics actually operate, subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on notifications, and share this analysis with someone who wants to understand the real systems behind wealth creation. I will see you in the next breakdown.